on one of the ones where I think it was T-Rex and Rops. They shot two videos in the same night. I think it was. I think you even pointed it out. I think it was. So that particular studio, the guy that runs that studio, the guy that owns that studio, Malik, he's the guy that really got me into the Oz rap scene.
Okay.
Yeah. So I had to plug him, man, because if it wasn't for him, really, I mean, I wouldn't have any ties into anything. You know, I wouldn't have met Rops. I wouldn't have had any ties into this. So I have to plug him.
Yeah, that's sick, man. I was just about to ask that then. I was about to say, was that your connecting point for how you know Rops or how you've worked with Rops before then?
Yeah, 100%. So it was really weird that night. I just rocked up to the studio and we were just hanging out, you know, just talking, whatever. And then he said, "Oh, have you heard of Rops?" I said, "Yeah, I've heard of Rops. I haven't heard too much, but I've heard like one or two things, you know." And he said, "Oh, he's coming through tonight." I said, "Oh, mad." And then like, I think I was doing a session with another artist, another sick artist, Dre Cliche. Actually, he's a really good artist. You'll see him eventually.
Heard of him? Yeah.
But then after, like, we finished our session, and then sort of me and Rops got to talking and played a couple of beats, and then from there on, he started rapping, and then it just like the formula and the chemistry really worked from there, and then it was just from there on, it just kept going.
So literally he just heard what you were producing. Was you making like fresh beats there and there for him, or did you kind of show him what you already had?
Yeah, like, so I was playing stuff for Dre, and then I think he was there anyway. He could hear it, and then our session finished, and I started to play a few things, and I think Frontline was one of them, and then that's the one he ended up recording over, and that's what Frontline turned into. So it was just a beat that I'd played.
Oh, that's sick, man.
Yeah.
So did Rops come to the studio kind of knowing what you wanted to do, or was he just rocking up to just make music?
Yeah, I think he was just rocking up. I don't even think he had the intention of making music. I think he was just turning up. So
and a business partnership just sparked from there.
Basically, yeah.
Oh, that's sick.
That's how it unfolded.
And so you ended up producing how many tracks on his album?
I did the whole thing.
The whole thing?
The whole thing, yeah.
What? I thought you only did a few tracks. You did the whole thing?
I did the whole thing, yeah. I did the whole thing. Thanks, bro.
That's a round of applause moment there. That is a round of applause moment. Okay, so when people look at Rops and they're like, this is the style that Rops brings, you are a massive driving force behind that then. You are the engine that kind of like, right, you are the framework for what he is able to lay out for us then.
I mean, it can be interpreted in so many different ways. I mean, it goes hand in hand. Like he's a fucking dope artist. You know what I mean? Like if it wasn't for his, I guess, you know, for him being who he is, you know, it wouldn't have complemented the beats for what they were. You know what I mean? So it goes hand in hand. But definitely, I can see what you're saying there. Definitely, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, that's sick, man. So you produced the whole album. I'm assuming you mixed and mastered it all. Like you did all the engineering side of it as well.
Yeah, did all of that. I mean, obviously, like, it was crazy because it's like we had finished like the last track, like say 3 weeks before we actually decided to release it. So one night we were in the studio one night, and Dills, his manager, he's like, I think we have to drop this album on the 6th of the 4th, which is Rops' postcode, 6-4. Like, that's why it's Rops' 4.
Yeah.
And he's like, we have to drop this album on the 6th and the 4th. It was like 3 weeks out. I'm like, bro, how are we going to mix and master this thing in 3 weeks? You know, he's like, we just got to get it done. So it's like, everybody put their head down. We got it done, man. So
and smashed it out.
We got there in the end, yeah.
That's it. So that's just an impromptu, like, you know what? This makes sense of when to drop it, and you are kind of looking at that deadline thinking, yeah, sure, we'll give it a go.
Yeah, totally.
Was there any cut content because of that? Was there anything that wasn't like polished enough, or was it kind of, you know what? I think we've set our mind on getting this amount done, and then that's what you managed to put out.
I think there were about 3 or 4 tracks that didn't make it. I think maybe like those 3 or 4 probably weren't finished the way we wanted them to be finished. And I, you know, you'd understand being an artist, so you know how it is. So,
of course.
Yeah. And then
of course. I think it's the worst thing when an artist or an act rushes content to put it out on time. You always notice the difference, whether it be films or games. Like, there's plenty of industries in the world where whenever you rush a product, normally you can end up seeing that in the finished result itself.
100%.
So I always agree, just either take more time to work on it or cut it if it's not good enough.
100%.
Or not ready yet even, and maybe you can use that later on down the road. But yeah.
That was definitely the case, man. Like those 3 or 4 songs, I mean, they were great ideas, and like the content was awesome, but it just like they weren't done the way, you know, he wanted them to be done. Or
no, of course.
So, you know, they unfortunately they didn't make the album, but the 15 that were on there were songs that we were definitely like, yeah, these have to be on there. So, and 4 of them, you know, you did the reviews on them anyway, so 4 of them had already been heard, but there were 11 more that nobody had heard, and that's what we were like so like excited to give 11 songs to people, you know, 11 new songs.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good balance as well in terms of singles to what you then put out on the album release. Like, I know, obviously, you heard of the American artist Joyner Lucas. Yeah, so obviously Joyner put out his album ADHD, which I was massively excited for as well, and the release date kept getting pushed back, and then by the time we got the finished product, there was like 20 songs or whatever, which like a good quarter of them are skits as well, and then you already heard like 9 of the tracks, and then there's only like 4 or 5 new ones, and it was like you heard more than what you was given new, and it just didn't feel right. Whereas other artists just kind of sometimes do a surprise album, boom, here's 20 new tracks that you've never heard before, and then sometimes that's a bit too overwhelming, and sometimes the best work gets overshadowed because of it, because there's so much attention having to be spread out. I think that's a really interesting conversation to have about different artists and how many songs they should put in an album. Like, certain artists, I don't think they're ready for an album. I think they should just work on an EP for now. There's other artists where it's like, I'm dying to hear more from you because I believe that you definitely can bring us that. You know, and sometimes it's not necessarily down to talent. Sometimes it's just about an artist's life story or what's going on in their life. It's like, how much do we feel like we need to hear from you as an audience? You know, and I talked about that in the Rops review, saying about, and correct me if I'm wrong, just off the top of my head.
Sure.
I managed to say that there was 4 or 5 that I felt that didn't need to necessarily be there, and 10 tracks would have been my personal opinion would have been 10 tracks would have been perfect. But it's interesting because did you, when working with Rops, did he have an idea of this is how many tracks I want to have, or was he kind of just making content and then just whatever works is what ended up being put out?
Yeah, it was definitely on the fly. I mean, we were just making tracks, and you know, every song that he would come into the studio and say, look, I've got this that I really want to put on the album. He had it written before he came in, so you know, we'd be you know, siphoning through beats and looking at beats and what would fit and what wouldn't, and maybe make a new one or whatever it is. And he was like, this has to go on the album. And there were a few of those that had to go on the album. So he already knew that. I don't think he had a particular number of how many would be on the album, but he knew what songs would be on there. It just happened to be 15. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, and that's just how it works out. But he had his 4, 5, 6, however many it was, that he was just like, no, this definitely has to be there.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
That's sick. Talk to us about the cursor feature.
Cursor feature, man. I think that's been in like the works forever. You know, like everyone's been seeing them on socials together. You know, Curse always dropped into the studio. Like, Curse is probably like one of my favorite, not just artists, but one of my favorite individuals and human beings, because like for the status and caliber of who he is, he's like the most humble and genuine person. You know, and that's very hard to come across in this industry, man. Very, very hard.
And just to be clear, he's not so necessarily humble in his music, but as a person outside of the music, he's a humble person. Because in his music, he's very cocky, very chest out. I'm saying everything, and I mean
absolutely.
It. But as a person, when you talk to him, he's a very humble person.
Absolutely, man.
No,
like
100%, I agree with that.
You know, the fact that, you know, he's, you know, one of the biggest rappers in the country hasn't gone to his head. So he's definitely remained grounded, and he's just one of those people that you can, you know, when you're having a conversation with him, you can believe what he's saying and believe what he's telling you, you know. But back to the point, I think that the feature's been in the works for a while, man. Like, you know, they've been seen with each other on socials, they've been, you know, talking to each other on Instagram, you know, all that sort of stuff, and people have been hanging for it. So I think the album was the perfect time. It was the perfect timing, you know. I didn't necessarily know what song it would have been, but one day Rops did come to the studio and he said, look, this is the one that Curse is going to go on. So, you know, we had to make sure that it was going to be hard.
No, definitely. And so, he knew that he wanted to have Cursor on. Did Rops kind of make the conscious decision of, I only want Cursor as a feature and nobody else? Like, what was the reasoning behind only having Cursor as a feature on the album?
To be honest with you, I don't know the real like deeper thoughts behind it, but I could probably say, I think Rops just Okay, so firstly, I think the idea of having Cursor as a feature, like nobody can really get that. So, or nobody has really had that besides Cursor's guys. Like the JUF and Rates. They're the only two guys that really have ever had a Cursor feature.
Yeah, he keeps it within his own clip.
Absolutely,
100%.
absolutely. And for the fact that Rops had him on his first debut album, that's a big thing. And I think that in itself is a statement. And I think he wanted to keep it at that. Anything more than that, probably I don't know. To be honest, I don't know what he was thinking, but I think it was a good move. To be honest, I think it was a good move because that's one song that everybody would have been looking forward to. So. And I think it did well. I think, a lot of people would have opened up that album, went straight to number 10 or whatever number it was, and just heard it straight away. So,
no, I was just about to mention that. I mean, just even having a name like that, and it being the only name, and there's something so special about having just one feature on an album because it really highlights that feature. And even if you're a casual fan, or even if you're discovering this artist for the first time and you just look at that track list, say you go on Spotify and you click on their album and then you just notice there's one feature, I'm going to listen to one song from this artist, let's click on that one. It's just, and especially because Cursor is, arguably the biggest name in Australian hip-hop, if you wasn't a fan of Rops but you are a fan of Cursor, or whether you didn't know about Rops but know about Cursor for some reason, then people are going to be like, well, I want to hear Cursor anyway. And that's your introduction to Rops. And I've got to say that track worked really well. The chemistry between them two, and the way obviously you've tied that with the instrumental there. It just stylistically worked really well. But Cursor did stand out in his own way. The minute he spoke on that mic, you can hear the difference because you've heard 9-10 tracks of Rops. Then Cursor's voice touches it, and it's just new to your ears.
100%.
It works really well. In my opinion.
I definitely agree with you.
That's sick. So Rops did this album, he's put it out, and I know you're going to continue to work with each other in the future. Is it just kind of just chill for now, or is he like straight back on the music?
He's like, I mean, with all this crap going on at the moment, it's really hard to get in again, because everyone's just like tied down and very weary and like cautious about their movements and stuff. And it's like, can we really go into a place with more than 3 or 4 people? People might look at us and say, what's going on? But I think, we're talking all the time. We talk every day and all that sort of stuff, through Instagram, and we're talking about, what have you been writing? Or, I've got beats. I've been sending him beats, and just back and forth. And every now and again he'll show me a verse and be like, oh, this is, is this good? What do you reckon? And so he's definitely got his mind on already starting album 2, which is a good thing, right? I mean, like, imagine dropping a second album in 1 year. That's something that nobody really does.
Are you looking to drop it by the end of the year?
I mean, he's definitely got it in his sights, for sure. Yeah.
That's mad.
Yeah, it's big, man. And it's, I mean, I don't know I don't know if he's decided if it's going to be another, solely just Rops, or if he's going to get some other features. But I think this second album, if it works in the way that he wants it to work, I think he'll definitely have some big names on there. So
yeah, I mean, you see that sometimes from artists where they put out an album that is, purely their creative viewpoint, and then they get their reception on that, and then they normally follow it up with less of an album and more of a mixtape where they get the features, and they go for that more commercial sound. They go for the sound that appeals to others more than themselves. Sometimes, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. It's oftentimes they end up being quite popular. UK rapper Giggs did it. He did his album Landlord that had a mixed reception, good positive reception, but mixed. And then he dropped his mixtape Warm to Them, and he had the features on nearly every track there. And my God, there were some, and they were the ones that were considered classics off of there. Some people do it, and this wouldn't be the case for Rops, but some people do it as kind of to bounce back as quick as possible. Eminem did it. He did that Revival album. We won't speak too much on that album, and then he followed it up with a Kamikaze. There's plenty of artists that do that. And if Rops is doing it from the standpoint of, I've put out an album, it's been positively received for the most part, from what I understand anyway. let's go follow it up with something else and just really just smash this year out and make 2020 his year.
It's really hard to determine how well it's done though, because usually when you drop an album, there's like a show that follows, and then so because we're locked down, we can't really do a show. But I'd imagine that if we had a show, like I genuinely believe that he'd be able to sell the show out. You know?
Easily. I reckon he would. And I mean, just clear something up for me real quick. Rops and Cursor, are they from the same area as Sydney?
They're so originally from Campbelltown. Like I don't know the exact where they live, but like from that way. So which is
okay. And so with obviously Cursor, putting on for Rops and people publicly knowing their relationship and now knowing that they've made music together and that they plan on doing that in the future even. Did that give a boost to Rops's kind of reputation, or did it boost kind of his expectation almost, where people are like, oh, Cursor's the one, like, and Cursor doesn't do it with many people, but Cursor's like, yeah, Rops is going to be the next big thing up. And so does that, I don't know, does that put pressure on Rops? Did it build the excitement for him? How much did that change for Rops? And obviously I know it's difficult for you to answer that on behalf of him, but from your perspective.
I mean, in my opinion, like from what I think, I mean, anybody who would have, Cursor back them in a sense, the people are going to listen to that. The people are going to see that and they're going to say, well, yeah, you're right. He's next, or he's the guy. And does that put any pressure on Rops? I'd say, I mean, Rops is definitely, he's able to handle any sort of pressure, but I mean, I'd say that there is some sort of expectation, but I mean, just listen to him. He's definitely, he can hold his own. His music speaks for itself. You know what I mean? And I think it's one thing that I really noticed when you were doing, I think it was the first review that you did of Frontline. And you mentioned that Rops is like that kind of artist where when he's delivering in like an aggressive yet relaxed way. And it just sounds like whatever he's saying is very compelling. So when you hear him speak, it's like he draws your attention. You're listening to him. You know what I mean? So in person, he's that kind of individual as well. So he can handle the pressure the pressure that's building. I think he can handle it, and the expectations that are there, I think he can meet them. So in a sense, I think he'll do well.
Yeah, that's it, man. I mean, being able to rap in almost a passive aggressive way.
It is. It is.
Being the loudest in the room doesn't necessarily always mean dominant, so it doesn't always necessarily mean you're the biggest,
That's right.
But being able to just that conviction in when he says something, that kind of, I listen to certain artists, whether that be UK, Australia, US, and there's certain artists that I just don't believe it when they're saying it. It may be true, what they're talking about, but I just don't believe. With Rops, he's one of those artists that can make me believe what he says, whether it's true or not. And I take him to be quite a genuine person, and all of the legal things he talks about to be true. But he's able to say things in a way that obviously connects with the audience, and it does make it a lot easier to enjoy his music when you believe what someone's saying, when you believe the story that they're telling. But man, shout out to Rops, man. You and him did a fantastic job with that album.
Thanks, bro.